Hello, everyone. Father Norm here. Always look forward to connecting in this way. Today, although you won't see it today, we usually put this video out on Thursdays. Today is Tuesday, and it's November 11th. And I thought, well, I would reflect on today, even if you don't see it for a couple days, because in our United States culture, today we remember Veterans Day. November 11th. And probably many of you, maybe not everybody, know it actually began. That was when, after World War I, the Treaty of Versailles ending the war on November 11th, and it came to be known as Armistice Day, for a number of years. But then going on through the decades, recognizing not only that, but all the veterans, living and deceased, that have given their lives to the country, and remembering them in a special way today. And I want to do that here as I'm reflecting, because for me, I never was in any war, but I'm very grateful for those who've given their lives for the cause of freedom. And mentioning that, I was ordained in 1974. In 1975, that would have been 30 years after the end of World War II, 1945. And so the soldiers then, 50 years ago, were probably, in their 50s mainly. And I knew some from the parish I was at that time, St. Barnabas in Northfield. And so what we decided to do on that Veterans Day, 30 years after World War II, we honored the veterans. We honored them and even remembered them at our masses. At first, we were going to have them stand up. But we heard from the veterans, no, we don't want to stand up and make a big scene, but we'll be there and be recognized. And so we did that, and so appreciative of giving their lives. Then, right around that time, also, the Vietnam War ended. But the Vietnam War affected a lot of people in my generation, going back when it really heated up in 1965. And so we took a look at that. And one of the things that struck me deeply and personally, probably in my first parish, a couple of years after we had that Veterans Day, a friend of mine from the parish, around my age, and back then he was probably around 30 or so, but he had been in the Vietnam War and he had seen action. And when I talked to him, he seemed like he's pretty together and just a sharp guy, doing good work, making in a marriage with 2 daughters and family. And so, yeah, he's whatever trauma he might have had in that war, it seemed like it was over. However, when I was there in between 74 and 79, somewhere probably 77 or so, he had a breakdown. He actually had a breakdown on Veterans Day where he was at a grocery store and they were honoring veterans, and he saw a veteran there who was in a wheelchair and, and letting people know and encouraging their support. Well, he said that traumatized him. He ended up in the hospital for a couple days, and I remember visiting him, and everybody was amazed by it because it seemed like he had it all together. Only around that time did the American Psychiatric Association begin to use the term post-traumatic stress disorder. They used other terms in previous wars, but saying this could happen. And post-traumatic, this fellow was an example of that because he was doing really well for a few years, but then he had that event that happened and what happened to him. And I remember he went and got some counseling help. Originally, he had a difficult time with that because it's like, I'm a veteran, I'm strong, I don't have any difficulties, I got through to my country and now I'm here. Well, he hid some of that even from his family, way more vulnerable. Thankfully, since then, they've encouraged veterans, all veterans, to be able to acknowledge, hey, it's okay. Thank you for being there in whatever war you were in, and it's okay to have some struggles even later on. Still, for some of them, that masculine kind of stereotype, no, I got to be tough and not let anybody see. Thankfully, people have been more open. And in fact, after the seeing what happened to people in Vietnam back in 19, oh gosh, it must have been 94, something like that. After, what would that have been, 25 years or so, 90, yeah, after the Vietnam War, we decided, I was at St. Martha at the time, we decided to have a retreat for Vietnam veterans. Well, and we did. It was a day-long retreat, and for the veterans, we were aware, but even more aware at this retreat, how many of them coming back from Vietnam were not greeted very positively here in the United States, because there was a lot of criticism about the war and what the president was doing. Unfortunately, it landed on them. Why, you people, why'd you go to war and do that to these horrible people? And rather than appreciating and recognizing the contribution they made, just like we recognized it in World War II, whatever one felt about the war, these men, mainly men, some women, went there to do their part, and in their part to protect democracy and freedom. And so they were there with sincere hearts. They came back, and for many of them, what they saw in Vietnam and then the way they were treated, they had some deep issues. So we had this retreat, and it has stayed with me ever since. At this retreat, there were about 30 people who came. Most of them had been in Vietnam. Some were in the Vietnam era and were touched by it. And I remember just one example I'm going to use here. One fella, in the midst of all of this, he gave a little talk, and we were talking about healing and reconciliation and how God could touch them and help them, and other ways to help themselves and to appreciate them. This one fella who had become Catholic said, "You know, I became Catholic. I came to a Christian sense. I was in Vietnam. We were ambushed. One of my buddies, I was injured, and my buddy was near me, and he was very, very injured." He said, and I heard him over and over praying the Our Father and the Hail Mary. And then in terms of that, he said, at a certain time, I didn't hear him praying anymore. He had died. This fella's deeply touched by that. And yet, he said, his example of even dying, praying these prayers from his Catholic faith inspired me to look into and become Catholic, and I have. And he said, that's made such a difference with faith and with a faith community that supports me. So today, and again, this may be happening a couple days later, but this Veterans Day, remember the veterans, pray for them, bless those who are in the troops now that are still doing a lot, and be grateful for what they do and what they have continued to done. And maybe if you know a veteran, give them a call, or doesn't have to be, I know it's a couple days after Veterans Day, but let them know we appreciate what they've done. God bless all of you for the difference we try to make in making a better, more peaceful world where someday there'll be no more war.